It's time for Mornings at 8 with Jonathan Mark on AM 1480 WLEA.
Oh, yes, it is time for Mornings at 8. It is 8:05, and here we are. Well, it's Wednesday. That means it's halfway through the week. So right now you can see the weekend starting to peek up over the horizon just a little teeny bit. So it'll be here soon enough. We are halfway through the week. Not bad. This weather, I mean, really, what do you say? It just keeps on so unseasonable. However, the flowers are loving it. I mean, our flowers are really having a good time with all this rain we've had. I think a little bit of sunshine to do good too, but, I guess the rain is okay because they are really coming along. And I guess, it's funny, I guess life is really all in the timing. I mean, we all know that. I've said it a gazillion times. One of my wife's sisters is visiting us from down south. And she arrived, let me see, on last Thursday, and she's leaving this morning. And the entire time that lady has been here, it's been terrible weather. So this weekend, according to Rob Carolyn, it's going to get a lot more seasonable. It's going to get a lot more pleasant, more sunshine. So after she goes, right, then we'll have the good weather. So I hope she enjoyed her rainy, overcast, and kind of semi-gloomy type vacation. It's so strange. Anyway, okay, let me see here. Well, yesterday, as a matter of fact, a number of times in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've had stories about the Green Light New York bill, the bill granting illegal immigrants the opportunity to get a driver's license. So it passed, and the governor has signed it, and we have a little bit more on this. Where is it here? Right here. Okay, Governor Cuomo signed the controversial Green Light New York bill on Monday, allowing undocumented immigrants to get driver's licenses. Right. The legislation divided lawmakers and created concern for some county clerks who oversee DMV operations. Rensselaer County Clerk Frank Marola tells NBC News 10 that he will not issue undocumented immigrants a license in his office. He says, I go back to the Constitution. You're not supposed to help or aid anybody if they're here illegally, especially if we know that. He said there will be no way to distinguish between an undocumented immigrant and an American citizen. There's no right to a driver's license. He says there's no right. It's a privilege. And it's not a privilege we should be giving to someone who's here illegally. He says, I am not anti-immigrant. My wife is a naturalized citizen. My son is a cop. So I think more of law enforcement. I've never heard anybody in law enforcement come out and say, this is a good idea. Not at all. He says it puts them in a tough spot. They're at a disadvantage here. We're going to give them a license that looks just like yours or mine, and they wouldn't even know that they're here illegally. Democrat Assemblyman John McDonald admits that this was not an easy choice. He said he was on the fence for quite a while and even issued a survey in his district. He said, I get it. I understand it. But at the end of the day, you have to listen to the people you represent. Well, that'd be novel, wouldn't it? Anyway, and the majority of people are just not ready for it yet. I don't know how many people are really going to step up and get their licenses. My rationalization was if someone wants to become a citizen, they're going to raise their hand and say, how do I go through the process? So McDonald ultimately voted against it, as did Democrat Assemblyman Angelo Santabarbara. There are other major concerns, and one was the fact that you need to register to vote in New York State. New York State is a 9-digit license ID number. Assemblywoman Patricia Fahey, who voted in favor, says she's been assured they will not be valid at the polls. That's been a big concern for a lot of lawmakers. She says the one thing I was not concerned about. Quite frankly, if someone is worried about being arrested, the last thing they will do is show up at a voting booth. Probably true. She added that it would make the roads safer because there will be less hit and runs, and the law will take effect in 120 days from yesterday. Marola and Washington County Clerk Stephanie Lemire said their offices are already bombarded with people looking to apply for an enhanced license or real ID. The state mandating that unless you have a passport, you'll need one to either fly somewhere on October 20, 2020, And they said the state is not taking that increased paperwork and responsibility into consideration. And Marola said, I have been here over 30 years, and this is the worst it has ever been. New York State has really not thought this idea through. And the Driver's License Access and Privacy Act is expected to face continued opposition and legal battles. He says, I have a gut feeling this is going to run into some legal challenges, and we're going to have to go back and revisit it. That's just my gut, said McDonald. So right now, 12 states and Washington, D.C. currently allow undocumented immigrants to drive. So that probably will be challenged in court. Next we have, and this is a follow-up to a story that Brian had on the 8 o'clock news about the governor has reached agreement with lawmakers on a bill addressing climate change. And this is from some website called, what is it? Climate Wire. Climate Wire. Governor Andrew Cuomo said yesterday he has reached, well, this was posted yesterday, so this would be Monday, okay? The governor said yesterday he's reached an agreement with legislative leaders over a bill to slash New York's greenhouse gas emissions, setting the stage for one of the most significant state climate victories since President Trump took office. The announcement coming just days before the close of the legislative session. By the way, this is the last day. This is Wednesday, so the session ends this evening, I guess. The announcement coming just days before the close of the legislative session represented a big victory for climate activists who have spent 3 years pushing for major legislation to curb greenhouse gases in the Empire State. That would be New York. Lawmakers were still working on the final amendments Monday, but the outlines of the deal were becoming clear. The legislation calls for reducing emissions by 40% from 1990 levels by 2030 and 85% by 2050. The remaining 15% of emissions would be offset, making the state carbon neutral. The bill would also require that all electricity generation come from carbon-free sources by 2040. A Climate Action Council will be established to ensure the state meets its targets. And the governor said in a radio interview on WAMC, that's in Albany, I believe we have an agreement and I believe it is going to pass. The comment ended months of speculation over the fate of climate legislation in New York. Democrat lawmakers who seized complete control of state government when they took over the state Senate last fall had been pushing a bill called the Climate Protection Act. The bill would spend 40% of the state's clean energy revenues on energy-efficient measures and renewable installations in disadvantaged areas. That drew repeated public objections from Cuomo, who said he wanted to ensure that environmental revenue was spent on environmental programs. Ultimately, the two sides settled on a compromise. At least 35% of revenue would go to disadvantaged areas, and that funding could rise as high as 40%, which would amount to $370 million. It was a question of the distribution of the funding, said Cuomo. I understand the politics on these issues. Everyone wants to make all these groups happy. Taxpayers' money is taxpayers' money. And if it's taxpayers' money for an environmental purpose, I want to make sure it's going to an environmental issue. This transformation to a new green economy is very expensive. We don't have the luxury of using funding for the political purposes. Now, business interests had urged Cuomo and Democrat lawmakers to slow down, saying the legislation threatened 40,000 manufacturing jobs in the state. 40,000 jobs. And the Business Council of New York State called zero carbon emissions unrealistic. But the Democrat lawmakers forged ahead, and an agreement has been reached. Now, where was he? State Senator Todd Kaminsky, a Democrat, said New York's action would send a major signal to markets, helping companies plan for a cleaner future. But ultimately, he said lawmakers were responding to voters. Our constituents told us, he said, don't come back without doing something on climate. And the future is now, and I think we've taken that important step. So, there we go. That's how that's going in Albany. Now, from Albany, we go to something entirely different. Washington, D.C. You think of Washington, D.C. What's going on in Washington, D.C.? Well, that's right. We all know what's going on in Washington, D.C. But this story is something, this is kind of unusual. They're not talking about politics. They're not talking about Trump. And they're not talking about the Democrats and the Republicans and this and that. What they're talking about is spies. Spies in Washington, D.C. Where did I find this? At WTOP. It's a very famous radio station in Washington, D.C. And you remember Mad Magazine? Everybody remembers Mad Magazine if you're a certain age. And there was this little, I think it was a 1 or 2 panel cartoon called Spy vs. Spy. And one spy was dressed all in white, and the other spy was dressed all in black. And they would try to do these things to each other, and it was really funny. It ran for years and years and years. So one spy would put it to the other spy, okay, and it just went back and forth. It was really hilarious, only this isn't really hilarious. Let me see. The city's population, Washington, D.C., has a population of 700,000. Usually. But during the workday, with everybody coming in, it swells to more than 1 million people. Waves of civil servants, military and law enforcement officers, business people, students, diplomats, and tourists saturate Washington, D.C., so it's more than 1 million people. And that's a scene on a typical workday in the world's most powerful city, whose business revolves around secret meetings, information, and documents. Woven into that orderly bedlam are sophisticated networks of foreign nationals whose sole purpose is to steal secrets. They are spies. According to the International Spy Museum in D.C., wouldn't that be fun to visit the International Spy Museum? I think that'd be really cool. Anyway, according to their figures, an educational and historical center of the U.S. Intelligence Documentation and Artifacts, there are more than 10,000 spies in Washington, D.C. When you think of the people that live, 10,000 spies. That's what they estimate. Now, while there may be some quibbling about the actual numbers, the FBI agrees with the premise. It's unprecedented, the threat from our foreign adversaries, specifically China, on the economic espionage and the espionage front, said Brian Dugan, Assistant Special Agent in charge for counterintelligence with the FBI's Washington field office. As this unparalleled wave of international espionage aided by technology explodes in D.C., the variety of spies has diversified as well. He says a spy is nondescript. Well, that's right, you're a spy, right? Okay, so nobody can know you're a spy. A spy is nondescript. A spy is going to be someone that's going to be a student in school, a visiting professor, your neighbor. It could be a colleague or someone that shares a soccer field with you, Dugan said. The archetypical international spy in Washington for many years has been undercover diplomats and foreign intelligence agency assets. There are more than 175 foreign embassies, residences, chancelleries, and diplomatic missions in D.C. Tens of thousands of international students reside in the region, and untold number of business people with links to foreign intelligence services flow in and out every day. The training of highly skilled spies, especially those who work in Washington, makes them virtually invisible to ordinary unsuspecting people. Washington, according to current and former U.S. intelligence sources, is normally the place where most countries send their best spies. Sergei Tretyakov, perhaps the most celebrated Russian agent to defect to the U.S. in modern times, told WTOP before his sudden death in 2000. I wonder how that happened. When a spy has a sudden death. Anyway, told WTOP before his sudden death in 2010 that the U.S. was regarded by Moscow as its, quote, main target. Thus, their best assets would be sent there. And John Cipher, how's that for a name for a retired CIA official? John Cipher, who worked on its worldwide Russia program, said that the Russian government is believed to have hundreds of spies on American soil. I think that's really interesting. I mean, there's an estimated 10,000 spies in Washington, D.C. I guess you can't, wherever you go, you're going to like bump into a spy somewhere. That's got to be really a unusual atmosphere. So let me see, there was, someone said, who is this? Robert Baer, who spent decades as a covert operative for the CIA, told WTOP that it's difficult for even the best of the best spy chasers to catch a good spy in Washington. He says everybody in the espionage business is working undercover. So if they're in Washington, they're either in an embassy or they're a businessman, and you can't tell them apart because they never acknowledge what they're doing. That's right, they're a spy. They're not going to tell you they're a spy, right? And they're good, so they leave no trace of their activities. Baer said further, with the darknet and various private encryption platforms, algorithms, and the rest of it, you can operate right here in Washington, D.C., and if you're good and you're disciplined and careful, the FBI will never see it. So that's, wow, I thought that was really neat. I mean, you would think, okay, maybe there's like 30 or 40 spies in Washington, right? Maybe 40 but 10,000? Wow, okay, let me see what else we have. Oh, we have the dodgeball story. I'll wait on that. And maybe we'll just take a break and we will be right back.
From the Fox Sports Studios in Los Angeles, here's Eddie Garcia.
News from the NBA, where the Boston Herald reports that center Al Horford is not expected to re-sign with the Boston Celtics. Horford chose not to exercise his $30.1 million option for next season. The Celtics are now preparing for both Horford and All-Star guard Kyrie Irving to leave as free agents. In baseball games of note, it was the longest game in Major League Baseball this season, 5 hours and 45 minutes. It went 17 innings before the Twins walk off with a 4-3 win over the Red Sox. Max Kepler's bases-loaded single ended the game and Boston's 6-game winning streak. The Yankees beat the Rays 6-3. Edwin Encarnacion hit his first home run as a Yankee, as New York is now 2.5 games up on Tampa Bay for the AL East top spot. Brewers lose to the Padres 4-1, while the Cubs fall to the White Sox 3-1. So Milwaukee still has a half-game lead on Chicago for the top spot in the NL Central. The Mets beat up on the Braves 10-2. Atlanta now has a 2.5-game lead on Philadelphia for the top spot in the NL East. The Phillies were rained out for the second straight night in D.C.
New to golf or seasoned veteran, you'll enjoy the casual, relaxed atmosphere of Vanderview Golf Course. 2 miles from downtown Alfred on Waterwells Road, Vanderview is a 9-hole executive-length golf course with a driving range on one side of the road and the course on the other. Family-friendly and fun recreation for everyone. Greens fees are one price for unlimited play, $9.50. High school students, only $5. Children 12 and under with an adult, no charge. You can play up to 18 holes or 9 holes with a cart and get the second 9 holes at no additional charge. Ladies and senior golfers who don't hit the long ball, Vanderview's got the executive length that's just right for your game. And new this year, a season pass for only $100. That's a lot of golfing fun for a very little bit of money. Vanderview Golf Course, 2 miles from downtown Alfred on Waterwells Road. Vanderview Golf Course.
From the Fox Business Network, the Federal Reserve wraps up its 2-day meeting today. Investors are waiting for signs of what's happening with the economy and whether the Fed will be lowering interest rates in the near future. Most economists do not expect a rate cut at today's meeting, but investors are speculating there could be a rate cut this summer. CBS is said to be working on an offer for Viacom. The Wall Street Journal says a potential deal was discussed by CBS directors last week. CBS and Viacom were separated more than 13 years ago. This would be the third time there's been an attempt to reunite CBS and Viacom. Stocks rallied yesterday with renewed optimism about trade relations with China. The Dow Jones Industrials added 353 points, the Nasdaq was up 108, and the S&P was up 28. With the Fox Business Report, I'm Jenny Cosola.
Prescription products require an online physician consultation and are only available if the physician determines a prescription is appropriate. See website for full details.
Hey guys, good news! The expensive Little Blue pill is now generic, which means you can get the prescription medication to treat ED at affordable prices. And now get your first month's supply for just $5 at 4hims.com/Chris. Hims connects you with real doctors online who can prescribe the medication, and a pharmacy sends it right to your door. So easy. To get your first order for just $5, you need to go to 4hims.com/Chris. That's 4hims.com/Chris.
Today at Simmons Rockwell Nissan in Horseheads and Hornell, drive away in a new Nissan Rogue lease for only $279 a month. A new 2019 all-wheel drive Nissan Rogue S model with rear cross traffic alert, blind spot warning, and touchscreen display. Lease with no money down for $279 a month for 36 months. Only tax and DMV fees are due at signing. Shop Simmons-Rockwell.com.
And we're back. Okay, now, I think it was last week. I had a story about dodgeball. Probably most people in elementary school or grammar school or something have played dodgeball, right? I thought it was absolutely great fun. I really liked dodgeball in school. That was always a lot of fun. Anyway, I have a story from the Inside Edition, and it says dodgeball is one of the fastest growing sports for adults, with co-ed leagues springing up across America. One player told Inside Edition it's built a lot of confidence and courage to be at the front lines, be active in the sport. But the way dodgeball is played in schools and summer camps is coming under fire. New research claims dodgeball teaches children to bully other kids, and now there are calls for the sport to be, that's right, banned in schools. Ban dodgeball. Judy Lobianco, the former president of the Society of Health and Physical Educators, said dodgeball teaches all the wrong lessons. What might that be? Anyway, let's see here. We're asking kids to hit other kids with an object, and that's no longer appropriate. We don't use kids as human targets anymore. When did we use kids as human targets? Anyway, she told Inside Edition, the aggressors are going after kids who are weak and afraid, and the last thing we want kids to feel in school is weak and afraid. Maybe you will feel energized and think it's a lot of fun, but maybe they'd feel weak and afraid. Who knows? Ari Goldberg, who runs the New York City Dodgeball League, disputes that characterization. The problem isn't the students being bullies. The problem is that the teachers aren't teaching them not to be bullies. He said, you have a community and it's the most inclusive thing I've ever been a part of. So, you're not teaching them to be bullies. I mean, you're playing dodgeball. That's not being a bully. I still don't understand that, but they want to ban dodgeball. And that's according to, the former president of the Society of Health and Physical Educators. So there you go. They want to ban dodgeball. I think it was one of the greatest sports ever. It's so much fun. Okay, but I guess you can't do that anymore. Let me see. Oh, now normally I don't talk about videos because this is radio, and so it's hard to talk about a video on the radio. But you have got to see this. This thing has received over 5 million views. And I only saw it posted yesterday, or maybe the day before. Anyway, this is a video let me see. This takes place in a church, a Catholic church in Brazil. And some quick-thinking, the person in the congregation, luckily they took out their phone and they videotaped this. So there's the priest, he's sitting in a chair, and Mass is underway. And in the middle of the Mass, this dog enters the church. And I don't know what kind of dog. Have you ever seen Old Yeller? It looked like an Old Yeller type dog. So this dog enters the church. It sees the priest. What's the priest's name? Father Jose Geraldo Cabrera was leading Mass at the Nossa Senhora das Dores parish when in walked a random dog. Just a random dog. Walks up to the priest who's sitting in a chair, and he starts playing with him. I mean, this dog wants to play. Okay, this dog wants to play. It's really in a good mood. So he's sitting at the feet of the priest, who's in the middle of a Mass. And the priest has a microphone, and he's sitting down, and the congregation is singing. And then he joins in at some point, so my guess would be during the responsorial psalm, right? The responsorial psalm, right. So the dog starts playing, and the priest, is playing with the dog as he's trying to take part in the Mass. So this dog is playing with his vestments, and he's rolling around, and the priest is bending over and playing with this dog and petting it and all that, and the dog rolls over on its back. And obviously he wants a belly rub, okay? So this priest is in the middle of conducting a Mass, and this dog is in there. But this is absolutely adorable. I mean, this is adorable. The video is less than 60 seconds, but it's so adorable. You got to see this thing. I imagine it's all over the net now, so you could probably find it any old place. I guess if you look for priest, playful dog, Mass or something, but you've got to see this thing. This is absolutely, all creatures great and small, right? That's right. Okay, we'll see you tomorrow, 8:05. Bye.